Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about some of the best co-op campaigns for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Some of the best co-op pairings that there are. Now I've taken into consideration a number of things when selecting the factions on this list, like compatibility between campaign victory conditions, mechanics, and actually having good legendary lords. Now, to be fair, in co-op, it doesn't matter quite as much if you're dealing with a situation where someone's playing a weak legendary lord, if someone's playing a really strong legendary lord, on the other hand. So you can make a lot of things work that would otherwise be pretty miserable campaigns. Hell, you want to play an Imperial campaign? Sure, just pair Karl Franz with, I don't know, Durfu as an example. But I am taking into consideration just having legendary lord pairings that where both of them are at least decent, and the mechanics of the races and the lords themselves are good. Now, there's no particular order to these campaigns, there's no particular ranking, but I think the Sisters of Twilight, paired with a lot of their neighbors, with the exception of Taurox, can work really well. Taurox is the exception, but that's because of the Beastmen faction mechanics, where they need to raise elements to the ground and, establish hurt zones. Now, let me say this. In general, Wood Elves, when controlled by the AI, are really poor allies, because they'll just be very passive and won't help you out. Well, that's Wood Elves for you. But Wood Elves don't need to be passive, and in fact can be amazing allies. If you're playing a Wood Elven campaign, engaging in diplomacy with other factions is in fact the go-to method, because you don't need the territory, maybe some growth initially, but you don't usually need the territory around you, so you can obviously give it to other factions. Now, bear in mind, if you are playing a Wood Elf campaign, you're obviously going to want to send at least one army, maybe your main army around the world, to deal with the various trees. But the Sisters are certainly very, very powerful, and even the secondary army can really help out your partner. So, for the Sisters of Twilight, Katep, Morathi, Alith, Anar, hell, Sinnelleos if you want to go for it, and maybe even Grombrindle could be great ally choices. I think the best pairings are Morathi and Alith Anar, just because they're both really good legendary lords that can hold their own and fight and win it on their own. Like, they can win the fight around here on their own. And they benefit greatly from this territory that's surrounding you as the Sister of Twilight. The various territories here, the forest territories, they could benefit a lot from it. Like, let's say you're playing the Sisters and you're allied with Morathi, right? Well, Morathi's campaign plan is to go over here, take over this territory and sell it to Mazdamundi very slowly, or one territory at a time. Well, you can obviously take some of this territory as the Sisters yourself and then give it to Mazdamundi, or you could just give it to Morathi. You can then give it to Mazdamundi. Just speed out Morathi's ascension plan, because Morathi is incredibly good and the Sisters themselves are incredibly good. Working together, it's like you can paint the world in your colors. Of course, Morathi is going to be slower to move around the world, but the Sisters can teleport to the various trees, including the Gaian Vale. Morathi may want to take Ulf 1, and you just have the ability of teleporting there ahead of time and really putting the hurt on Alariel. Your army is stronger than what Alariel has to offer, and it's not like Alariel doesn't have other enemies to deal with. Sure, dealing with the Gaian Vale garrison can be a bit of a nightmare, but yeah, the Sisters can be like the vanguard force, and whoever they're allied with, whoever they're playing alongside with, is just basically the follow-up force who eventually takes the territory near them. Morathi and Alith Anar are pretty good choices in that respect, as I see it. The next campaign set to talk about is Settra the Imperishable, paired with a lot of his neighbors that may not want any of the territory in Khemri. Hell, you could ally Skarbrand for all you care. Like, someone could be playing Skarbrand and you could be playing Settra. Though I don't think Skarbrand would be a great ally for anyone, with the exception of Taurox. And I'll explain why Taurox especially, or I guess Malagor as well. But if you're playing a Skarbrand campaign, you're probably going to be teleporting next to Taurox. So that's why that particular pairing might work well. Invade Ulfwan together, teach Nakari who are the true champions of Khorne in the world. But Settra is generally a powerful legendary lord, though he obviously has a complicated campaign situation because he'll only have one army for quite a few turns, which will obviously limit his strategic potential. And also because there's plenty of enemies on every side of him that he needs to deal with one way or another. Like, obviously he has Arkhan to the west, potentially getting into a fight with Rapant, so you can avoid that. Then Tiktaq'to, which is incredibly aggressive against virtually all of his neighbors. So if you're playing Volkmar, if you're playing Manfred, Tiktaq'to is going to be coming for you. Maybe even Kroq-Gar will be coming for you. So Settra, but Settra can be a great ally, partly because he benefits from trade, partly because he has the ability to grow a pretty powerful empire if his flanks are protected. So you can pair Settra, who starts in the middle of this of Khemri over here, with a faction on his flanks that doesn't need that territory. So Tiktaq'to over here to the south, he doesn't need the territory Settra has. So Tiktaq'to can like be protecting the southern flank, expanding in the south, whereas Settra secures the center. You also could make it work with Kroq-Gar, though Kroq-Gar is going to be securing the east. You can also make it with Thorek. It doesn't work with Khalida, because you both want the Books of Nagash, right? Books of Nagash, and because you both want the same territory in order to achieve victory conditions. But it could work incredibly well for Thorek. See, the problem with Thorek's campaign is like, well, beyond the issues the dwarves usually have, though allying with Settra can help solve some of that, because Settra might be rolling a lot of cash, like a Tomb King Legendary Lord might be rolling in a lot of cash that they don't need. And if you can just funnel that cash into your ally, that can help them out. But Thorek especially, because he needs all of those artifacts, well, the way Thorek expands is that if you're playing him, you always want to keep heading north for the most part. There's some artifacts to the west as well, of course. But you usually want to keep heading north and expanding there. But the problem is you're obviously leaving your flanks exposed. But if you're allying Settra, if you're allied with Settra as Thorek, then that means, one, Settra can help gain you some of those artifacts, which will be great, right? So Settra can expand all the way to the west, take over the territory there, and you can gain the artifacts as Thorek if you're a military ally, so you don't have to go far afield for some of that stuff. It really helps with some of those annoyances, and will give you the necessary flank protection, because Settra doesn't care about the mountains. Thorek takes the mountains, Settra takes everything else, like the wasteland, the desert. Just keep heading north. Eventually, you will obviously encounter unsuitable climate, etc., as you start heading into the Empire. Or if you try and expanding into the jungle to the south, like let's say Settra and Thorek, right? Tiktaq'to is going to be a bloody nuisance. So maybe Kroq-Gar, but I think it could be an incredibly good pairing. Thorek has a very powerful army, but it's just one army that he can afford for much of his early game. So because of the way you want to expand this Thorek, it can be difficult to protect your flanks, and that's the role Settra can help can do in his campaign, protecting flanks and also funneling money into Thorek's coffers as he's gaining it, and doesn't really need it, because you, as the Tomb Kings, you may find yourself in a situation where you have a lot of money and you're not spending it because you're just waiting for the damn growth surplus points to actually accumulate. So you might have money to spare. Not from the very start, but eventually you will get to that particular point. The third pairing is Oxyotl and pretty much anyone else, though Order factions would take precedence, especially the Empire, the Kislev, the Dwarves, basically anyone near the Northern Chaos Waste that is Order. But bear in mind, again, it would work with any other faction in the game in general. The reason Oxyotl is a great faction to play in co-op with anyone else, regardless of who they are, is because of the Visions of the Old Ones. So regardless of where your ally is, with the exception of like the major exception of Wolf One, really, or let's say the Southlands potentially, though not necessarily so, but with some major exceptions, Oxyotl can and will be going around the entire damn campaign map, which means Oxyotl can help anyone out, and his army is nigh on unstoppable, more or less. he alone can paint the campaign map in a way no one else can. Like, Oxyotl's flexibility in terms of climate means he's one of the ultimate allies you can have on a campaign side of things. And also, of course, the Hidden Sanctums. Like, if you're playing Oxyotl, you can teleport, like, you can teleport to an allied location, put a Hidden Sanctum that gives you a capstone, so you can teleport there if your ally needs help, but then you are expanding across the southern castways. Or you leave, you expand a bit here on your own with Oxyotl's army, and then you leave a secondary army to deal with this until you start having to deal with Kairos over here. You beat Kairos, and then you're free to do whatever the hell you want in this campaign. And you have the ability of just showing up at certain points on the map with Oxyotl's entire full stack of troops, which in itself is pretty strong, and then taking one region. You don't even need to hold it. Taking one region, putting a lord there, and recruiting all your blessed spawnings, and just basically having 2 stacks of really powerful units to throw against the enemy. Or maybe taking a region, getting some hero capacity from that, and getting heroes, or not hero capacity, hero recruitment capacity can be greased back at home, throwing heroes in that secondary army, and damn, you just have a ridiculous level of power. Usually, when we're talking about visions, they tend to happen usually in the north. So, someone like Boris Ursus, potentially, if you're playing a northern campaign with him, or Katrin Kastaltin. Could be pretty good for that. Ungrim, the dwarves in general, could be, well, Thorgrim or Ungrim could also be pretty decent choices with respect to that as a pairing. Like, if you're playing a Kislev campaign, for instance, as just an example, is like, as Oxyotl may get a mission to deal with some Norscan faction or a Warriors of Chaos faction, which is great for you as Kislev, if for your partner who's Kislev, because Kislev doesn't really care about expanding the north because the Chaos Wasteland is obviously not great for them. But Oxyotl can take the entirety of Norsca and the entirety of the Northern Castway, so Oxyotl might be dealing with that while Kislev establishes a massive and powerful empire within the empire, conquering the entire bloody empire. Or you could work together to just annihilate the empire and then deal with the northern situation. So that's why Oxyotl works so well with a lot of factions, just that flexibility on the campaign map between teleportation and terrain types. The fourth pairing to talk about is Grimgor Ironhide and every single one of his neighbors. No joke. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Warriors of Chaos or the Chaos Dwarves. Though bear in mind, while Grimgor doesn't have a victory condition that requires him to take out the Chaos Dwarves do have a long campaign victory condition to take out Grimgor. So that obviously is a problem and a compatibility issue, but that doesn't mean you can't make it work. Like, if you're playing it as Astragoth or Zaytan, especially, it could work. Or maybe Drazif and somehow Grimgor avoids a war with Zaytan as Astragoth. Though, to be fair, Astragoth and Zaytan being wiped out by Grimgor isn't necessarily the biggest problem in the entire world for Drazif, though it will slow down your acquisition of tower seats, and obviously you won't gain any territory if Grimgor has to wipe them out. But Astragoth and Zaytan do have other issues in their campaign. Like, Grimgor can conquer basically the entire northern part of the Mountains of Morn, and, like, say for instance Kholek. Well, then Kholek can take over, can deal with the Dark Fortresses over here in the north, deal with Archeon, expand across the territory, or Kholek can vassalize, for instance, Astragoth and Zaytan as well, or just conquer Zaytan, give the Valerie to Grimgor because of the incredible landmark that does exist over here. I mean, obviously there's some issues there. I think the best pairing, as from my perspective, if you just want pure power, obviously a Chaos Dwarf or Kholek would work very well. But I think a very interesting pairing would actually be Grimgor and Greasus. Like, Greasus would conquer the southern portion of the Mountains of Morn, and up until, like, the Bone Road, take the Bone Road, everything else goes to Grimgor. And then you control all of the trade routes for Cafe and caravans. And if Greece doesn't have to worry about protecting the north from the biblical tide of death and destruction that Grimgor is, then Greece can actually have a pretty decent campaign. You'll be gaining a lot of money by raiding Cafe and caravans, and Cafe does have a difficulty in attacking you. There's only so many points from which Cafe can attack you, and hell, even if they do attack you, well, just unleash the green tide on them and watch them burn. Cafe doesn't stand a chance against Grimgor. Usually, as Grimgor, you don't want to go against Cafe for a number of reasons, because you do want to expand west rather than east if you're playing as Grimgor, but you can certainly do it, and there's no major issue that's going to hold you back. I mean, terrain types would be the main problem in that, but really, by the time you'd be dealing with Cafe as Grimgor, you'd have a lot of territory to give you the economic heart of your empire. You would also, of course, work with factions further afield. Imagine a pairing between Grimgor and Archeon as just an example, or like Kislev, or many other factions like the Empire or Vlad. Plenty of choices that are available there. Not the dwarves, I would say. The dwarves would probably be a poor pairing, but maybe Imric could work. Hell, even Tretch. Yeah, I know, shockingly enough, Tretch wouldn't necessarily be a poor ally for Grimgor. So yeah, Grimgor, who is the strongest legendary lord in the game right now, would work well with a lot of factions. The complication would be with the cast dwarves, because it means like if your partner is a cast dwarf, it means you don't want to take Zarnagrund, because you want to leave Zarnagrund for your ally to eventually confederate, or you could just decide, you know what, let me take it, let me get the extra money, the old early game money there, and then give it to your cast dwarf ally, though they would need to obviously establish a territorial link, which would be a problem for Zaytan, not so much a problem for Astrograph or Drasov though. And the final campaign pairing, and the one I'd personally rank as my number one, would be Deathmaster Snikch and Lokhir Fellheart. This is actually a natural alliance if you're playing a campaign in Cafe. Well, as Lokhir, because if you're playing a Snikch, Lokhir doesn't like you. As you might imagine, a lot of factions hate Skaven, including the Dark Elves. But if you're playing as Lokhir, more often than not, you'll actually end up allied with Snikch one way or another. And you're going to beat up Cafe and conquer Cafe together. And this is a great pairing because there's quite a bit of territory that Lokhir doesn't actually want from Cafe that Snikch can then just take over. So Snikch might control all of the northern parts and the western parts, whereas Lokhir takes pretty much of the south, though with the major exception of Mount Lee. At that point, you could work together to expand to the west, or Lokhir could head over across the sea lanes with his main army, maybe throw some supporting armies for Snikch, but head to the east in the jungles of Lustria to conquer them, whereas Snikch continues to the west to deal with the threats there. Like, you can just have a campaign where either you're working together against common threats, or you're securing each other's flanks. Especially early on, you're securing each other's flanks, which can be a bit of an issue for Snikch, because he does have a lot of territory he needs to defend. In this situation, you might have Lokhir actually taking the Imperial Road, whereas Snikch is, and maybe pushing against Miao Ying, whereas Snikch would worry about dealing with Xiaoming, and then, yeah, leaving Snikch the territory controlled by Miao Ying, as well as the land of Stone and Steel and the Great Bastion, whereas Lokhir would then deal with, taking the Celestial Riverlands. I think there's a lot of possibilities in this particular pairing. Both of them are pretty good Legendary Lords. Like, I think Morathi is the better Legendary Lord for the Dark Elves, though Lokhir is much, much better in the early game, and Skaven in general are incredibly good in an early game. And think about that. In a co-op campaign, how long do you want the campaign to be? Probably not 100, 200 turns. The great thing about Snikch and Lokhir is that they're both Legendary Lords that can pretty much access everything, heroes, units, very quickly in their campaign, so they're unlocking power. On their own, both Snikch and Lokhir can have very, very fast campaigns. pair them together, and I think they could probably achieve some of the fastest campaign progress in the entire game. That's my personal perspective. But the reason they can achieve that progress is both of them will earn a lot of money very quickly. Both of them will get a lot of hero and unit recruitment very quickly. They're nigh on unbeatable in individual battles, either of them. So pair these two together, yeah, you've got a major endgame crisis on your hands. Maybe not as powerful as Grimgor is, but still pretty damn powerful all the same. And that's all there is to say for it. Costin signing out. If you guys have any other ideas for co-op campaign pairings, please let me know. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Stay tuned for more.